It's a pleasure to introduce Wayne Duvenage to all of you. Having spent 3 decades in the tourism and transport industry, in 2012, Wayne left his corporate role to give full-time attention to the newly formed civil action non-profit organization called OUTA, of which he was chairperson and founding director. OUTA was initially set up to challenge government's irrational e-toll decision in Gauteng. In 2016, OUTA had expanded its mandate to challenge the abuse of authority within the public sector, escalating the non-profit entity to become a formidable civil activist organization. It currently employs around 45 professionals and activists that have taken on over 220 projects over the past 5 years. These have all been related to corruption and maladministration of taxpayers' money. Wayne schooled in KZN and is a BSc graduate of the University of KwaZulu-Natal and is married with 3 children. And Helen is here with us tonight as well. His favorite quote is by US labor rights activist Tyree Scott, who once said, "You can't leave people who created the problem in charge of the solution."
This one works. That one. This one working.
Give it a second or two, should do.
You have to put it on there.
Yes. I think at the bottom.
Oh, it's fine. Okay. Oh, there we go. Hi. Good evening, folks. Thanks for having me. I'm John and the U3 team. Been here before, so it's nice to be back. A lot of you are looking a lot younger. So what I thought I'd do is let's make this interactive and leave some time at the end for questions. I do want to give you a very short presentation or an explanation or show about the fuel levy. I think it's very topical now, the fuel price, sorry, not just the levy, and what's been happening. There's a lot of myths around price of petrol. It's an interesting fact. So I'll just go through that quickly and then we'll get into the rest of the talk. A little bit more about active citizenry, what it actually means and why it's so important, and then just finish off with a few views on the political agendas that are playing out in the country right now. So I just want to go through this, a few slides quickly. The South African petrol price, I think if you look on the right, that's the rands per litre. And down the bottom, we're just going to look at it from 2008 to where we currently are. There are 14 components in the price of petrol in South Africa. Some of them give rise to monthly fluctuations and others to annual increases. And the first element thereof is the one that we will hear about so often is the fuel levy. And what is interesting about this graph is it's stepped. And the reason for that is that it goes up every year in February. The Minister of Finance increases the levy. This is a tax. This is a sheer tax. The government taxes motorists, puts it into the fiscus and uses it. Initially bought in a very long time ago to fund roads, but it's not ring-fenced for roads. It is used for whatever else, but a lot of it does so-called get allocated to the various MECs in the provinces for their roads, some of it to SANRAL for the national roads, but not the full 90 billion rand that comes from this component today per annum. So 85 billion, but 90 billion next year. And that is obviously fluctuates due to the amount of traffic and then the rate itself. So it started long before this, but about 14 years ago, R1.27, and it's increased by 203% over that period. So an average of 9% per annum, and the average inflation rate has been 5.4%, so nearly double inflation over that period. And this is the problem that we've been warning government about, is that if you keep pushing this envelope too high, it eventually comes back to haunt you. And that's exactly what is happening right now with the Minister of Finance trying to deal with this hot potato what he did 2 months ago, for the first time, well, at the beginning of this year, for the first time ever, they decided not to increase this fuel levy. So it'll carry on flat for 2 years. And that's the first. That and the next levy, they held that. We had explained to them that this envelope had been pushed so far that if they continue to push this fuel levy up, it's going to be problematic. As you see, that's playing out right now. So what they did do is reduce it by R1.49, R1.50, it actually rounded to R1.49. So it took the fuel levy down for 2 months. And this was the big debate, which they only announced very late yesterday, whether they were going to extend this at R2.30, R2.36 for another month. And every month they keep this R1.49 reduction is a cost of 2.8 billion rand to the state. These first 2 months they sold our reserves, or 2/3 of them, to cover that, which is fine because they are there, they've been lying there for some time, and I guess there wasn't too much risk. And then you get the road accident fund. And you see how that has stepped up even more. I mean, the increase in a couple of these months has been extremely high. 13% on average per annum. So well about double the inflation rate. There's a 48% increase in 1 year for that levy and another 18% a few years later. Now, the road accident fund compensates victims for road accidents. I think it's very necessary. It used to be a third-party disc, you remember, but not everybody got caught in the net. People weren't renewing that with their licenses, and there wasn't enough funds. It was the right thing to put it into the petrol price. It was the wrong thing to escalate it to the extent they have. So that started off, well, 14 years ago was 47 cents, is now R2.18, at about 50 billion rand going into that scheme and being wasted. We reckon half of it is being wasted. Back in 2008, when it was getting about 4.5 billion rand, it was able to wash its face. It was able to compensate victims of road accidents. But today it has been plundered and maladministered. A lot of legal teams, plundering that part as well. And if you don't have good systems, you don't run like a proper insurance business, it's going to be decimated, and that's what's happened. So the next main component are these other 9 margins, levies, wholesale levy, the retail margins, this for the petrol pumps companies, and so forth. That's gone up as well, very high over the last period by an average of 9% per annum, those 9 other margins. And so all in all, the issue here is that if you take this breakdown in the fuel price, and there's just a little bit of a breakdown, the retail margin, there's 9 others, small ones in there, and there's the wholesale margin. So that's at R2.29. That one specifically has gone up by 13%. And our problem with government on that is that they don't push back. They give in every time. So the fuel retailers come and say, we need another increase, we need another increase. 13% per annum on average is just too high. It does help regulate the price of fuel. Now some say, well, let's deregulate it. What that does is it takes away the control that government have got to a certain extent to say, look, we need you to create employment as well. If you deregulate, all the pump jockeys would lose their jobs, or a lot of them would, depending, and you and I would be filling up like we do in Europe, where you pull up, you get out the car, and you pump your own petrol. There's a danger in that in this country. It's not as safe. So there's pros and cons. I just think they've allowed that to go too far. So all in all, the total from R3.13 to 10 Rand. So before we pay for 1 drop of the petrol, the graph's going to show you now what the petrol component is. That's what we pay. 10 Rand, 20 cents before you pay for any petrol. That was brought down slightly, but it will go up as this R1.50 reprieve is taken away at the end of next month. That's what the 10 Rand 20 is now down to 8.71, the total of those. So now we're going to make space for the other graphs. This is the petrol component. You can see what's happening. We're flattening all those graphs to make way for the 2 factors that impact on the petrol price, That is the rand-dollar exchange rate and the international oil price. The rand is weak, we pay more. So oil, we buy our oil using dollars. It's from the Mediterranean and the Singapore baskets of fuel, and they're all dollar-based and dollar-priced. So if there are geopolitical issues around the world and the price of oil goes up, as it has, it is fluctuating, we pay more. But what I'm going to show you in this graph is the interesting factor that comes in, and that's how the oil price has fluctuated, that impacts on the basic fuel component. So it's gone up, it's gone down with various geopolitical issues, OPEC, the Iran war, and very recently this drop here, where the price of petrol came down to R2. We were paying in this component something like R2.30 per litre. So if you're only buying petrol, this was during COVID when the world was in the lockdown and they just couldn't give petrol away. So it did drop for a month or two, but very quickly it's escalated. And this is the interesting component. In July 2008, we paid R10 per litre of petrol. And we were angry when it went up to R10. And it went up to R10 because oil was priced at $132 a barrel. And today's oil is priced at $115 a barrel. So why are we paying over 24 Rand today at $115 a barrel when a number of years ago it was at $132 a barrel? And the simple answer is the Rand was at R7.98, 94. And the levies were at R3.60. So you bring those two factors in, and you have the problem that we have today. In fact, it was $105 a barrel last month, and R14.90. So that move from R7.94 to R14.90 is the problem. You add another R10, and you've got a bigger problem. So at best, if we ever get oil prices back to where they should be, between 60 and 70, when there's some stability in the dollar, and it does come way below that at times, in the oil price, sorry, and if the Rand can strengthen somewhat to 12 Rand, when it can get there, and it has been there recently, the best we will get if they hold these levies is back to about 17 Rand. We'll never go below that. If you do, it's very temporary. So I just wanted to share that with you. It demystifies, I hope, the price of petrol. This is what's happened now. So as of yesterday, in June, it's gone up to 24.17. That blue extra part, and that's because the oil price had increased to $115 a barrel, and the Rand had weakened slightly. And if they bring back that levy, if they had have done that, that's where our petrol price should be, 25.67 Rand. So you can see why the minister had to hold that levy again for another, that reprieve, that R1.50 reprieve for another month. Because the shock of an increase like that is very impactful on cost of goods, consumers. I mean, we're a country that is trapped and held captive on the roads. We don't have a good public transport system. Metro rail has been decimated, PRASA. Those stations are empty now, they've been vandalized. The Department of Transport has really been remiss in the way they've managed that. Our rail system, Transnet, has literally been poorly managed. It is inefficient. People do not move cargo by rail anymore. They move it by road. So the price of petrol has a compounding impact here, as opposed to in Europe. Many countries don't have to own a car. Public transport is good. Goods get to and from markets largely on rail and road. So they have higher prices as well, but it doesn't impact on the lives as it does in this country when the oil price gets out of hand. So I thought I'd just share that with you and then just carry on chatting. Any questions on this graph? And see when it was R10.70 there, it came right back down to R10.31 here. So these are all oil price issues and not really in the Rand. And the Rand has weakened. Some of these peaks are because weaker Rand situations. This is the oil price coming down, and every time there's a war in the Middle East and OPEC reduces production, the oil price goes up. When that's fixed, when there's peace, when there's negotiations done, the oil price comes down again and we all benefit.
Can I ask one
Yes.
question?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Am I to understand that if it's an accident, the person who's damaged is not getting paid as they should today?
Yeah,
They're
so
now not driving anymore.
yeah, no, so you're talking about the damage as an injured.
Yeah, injured, yes.
But you do, but it takes a long time. So, you know, if you get injured in your life is impacted heavily, people can't work sometimes, whether it's your fault or not. The Road Accident Fund has always been there to compensate victims depending on the severity of the injury and your lifestyle, you know, whether you earn more or less. Those factors will determine how much you get paid out, or it gets paid out over time. Your therapists, your doctor's bills get sorted out. That's how it should be. And you should get those claims done quite quickly. But that's slowed right down now. It takes people years to get their money out of RAF. And what has also crept in is a lot of law firms have identified this as lucrative money, so they go and they fight on behalf of the customer. But very often the law firm gets half the money or a third of it, and then there are reports that need to come in from psychologists, from physiotherapists, and they really just milk the system. And it's government's inability, the Road Accident Fund inability to fight and control and manage that process effectively that has created this mess. So they really have just had to throw more and more money at it until now it's just uncontrollable, to the extent that they had to go to court and stop any further claims for 6 months last year. I don't know if you heard that. But that doesn't help you and I if we get injured.
Thank you.
This same thing was happening when George Bezos was fighting with the old government, the apartheid government. So it goes back, way back. It's not new.
Oh yeah, no, you're quite right. None of this is new. It's all relative. Yes.
You indicated that a lot of the fuel levy is going to non-transport, non-load.
Yeah.
Do you have a sort of a percentage for us?
I think about 60 billion a year is going to roads. Problem is, it's allocated
Sorry, of the 90.
of the 90. Now, Sanral gets about 15 for the national roads. Remember, Sanral's got a mix of tolled roads and non-tolled roads. Some of those are outsourced to public-private partnerships through the N3TC, Bakwena, and Tractor, the main corridors to Durban, Mpumalanga, and Limpopo. And that's on a build, operate, and transfer base. I'll tell you a little bit about that. So after 30 years, those roads come back to us. It's about, I stand to be corrected, but it's not the full 90 billion. The problem is that when they allocate that money to the MEC for roads and transport in the Free State, for instance, that money doesn't find its way to the roads. And the other problem, when it does, some of it that does get there, is the quality of those roads. So I used to drive quite a lot to visit my father in Newcastle. And the road from Warden to Memel was recently done. In fact, from Warden through to Memel over the past about 5 years ago, it was in great condition. Today it is potholed, it is dangerous. Roads should not deteriorate like that in 5 years. And how often do we hear Olivier's Hook and other roads where the contractors get paid up front, they start doing the work and then they just disappear. Potholes don't get repaired properly. So we have an issue and a problem of quality of work because there's no oversight, because the people who are doing the work are not qualified, and because jobs for mates and chums, and this is pure corruption. And we blame government, we blame the Minister of Transport and those MECs for not exercising stringent oversight and making sure that the people they appoint can do the job. So it's a serious problem.
Isn't the major problem our financial rating, and that's why the dollar's going up? And until we solve that, we won't get anywhere at all. It's the price of our dollar has gone up, not just with the cost of living, etc., but the money goes to cadres.
Yeah, so we do have a political ideology with the ruling party that has not ruled for the people, has not run effective government. So when you do a catered deployment policy, it's jobs for people you know, and it's not jobs for people who have the understanding and knowledge of the role. And you just have to look at Gwede Mantashe heading up energy. I don't think he knows how a light bulb works. You have to look at the Department of Transport. What is going on? The Transport Department is a mess. The International Air Services Council was out of commission for a whole year. This is the council that gives licenses to airlines flying in and out of the country. PRASA has gone to the dogs in this period. The ETOL decision has been, trying to settle that for 3 years and unable to do so. There's so many things that have gone wrong in many departments, and it's just really because the Road Accident Fund, as I said, the list is long, I can tell you. It's just sad, and that's what pushes up the cost of living, makes our rand weaker, and it's hard to invest.
There is a solution, possible solution, because I happen to know Cyril Ramaphosa from my medical side of things, and we are going to be meeting with him soon, and I will mention this problem. We're meeting on a medical side.
Yeah.
He did a wonderful job in collecting 2 million rand for us in 1993 when Mandela was released.
Yes.
And so we will mention, if I can get a copy of your talk, I think this would be really fantastic.
We are engaging with him on a regular basis. Well, his office as well, yeah.
But does it get to him?
Well, I think certain stuff gets to the certain people. I know it does because of what we see happening. For instance, these calls for the levies to be halted. The Minister of Finance contacted us about a month ago to discuss certain solutions they were looking at introducing and wanted to get our views on it. So I think for the first time there are some positive signs that Enoch Godongwana, the new Minister of Finance, is having to put out fires that were started so long ago. And this is not an easy problem to fix when you've allowed that administration to run right for 15 years. So there is a tendency to fix the political will, but I think the horse is bolted and it's going to be very interesting. I'll give you my views on what will happen in December and the end of 2024's election. Yes.
Where does the refining cost come into that? And I noticed that our refineries are shutting down.
Yeah, so the refining cost is in that basic fuel price. And the refineries here are too small for the volume that has to be pushed out. In fact, the volume is too small to enable them to recapitalize themselves. Engine technology has moved on. The refining process is not good enough. So what's happening now is they're having to make decisions. Do we renew, revamp them, or do we stop doing it? Because the actual refining price is cheaper to bring in refined petrol because it is done en masse at the countries where the oil comes from, as opposed to bringing oil and trying to refine it here. It goes to more storage, there's more costs. So the refining cost is in the basic price of fuel, and it's actually cheaper to do it overseas. Sad thing is it costs jobs. Yeah.
Provided you can get it into the country.
Oh yeah.
Crude oil comes in through a pipeline from out the sea.
Sure.
Sorry, just one more question. This business of points, is that also in the
point system for driver's license?
Lala Land?
Sorry, the points.
Points against bad driving, taking your license away. Is that also in Lala Land?
So yeah, I can just say that we've instituted the Orchard Act, that is the adjudication administration for traffic offences. That's where the point system comes in. It is unconstitutional. We had it stopped in court about 3 months ago. So we're in the constitutional court fighting with the Department of Transport about it. There's a constitutional issue. They can't go ahead with it. Secondly, even if they tried to, or if they could get around that hurdle, it is a grossly unworkable system. It's not going to happen. We don't believe it.
It works very well overseas. I've been overseas for 40 years. It worked really well there.
Yeah, a lot of things work well overseas. Don't do it, yeah, because it needs good administration. So the e-data system, which all this information sits, is 50% correct. You can sell your car tomorrow and you'll pick up traffic fines for the next year or two in some of those cars. You go now, I mean, many of you might have even seen on your e-toll bills that the cars that were going through those gantries were not your cars, they had your number plate. we're billing you. So there are big problems, and for that reason, the point system will fail, and many other reasons. Okay, so we'll take more questions at the end. I just wanted to talk a little bit about active citizenry, because this is what ARTA is about. And I guess the question always is, what is active citizenry, and why should anybody care? Why should we do anything? And if you just go back in time, active citizenry arises and it falls when the need arises. So in the apartheid era, there was a fundamentally flawed system, a political system that was just not right, and active citizenry was rife at the time. Organizations were formed and they challenged so many things, the past laws, challenged the law around the past laws, and eventually the systems do collapse. But it would never have collapsed had there not been citizens that were aware of their rights being transgressed. Now, because we're in a new democracy, doesn't mean to say that there's no need for citizens to become active again. And that's what's really happened. ARTA shouldn't exist, Corruption Watch shouldn't exist, AfriForum, Section 27, Helen Suzman Foundation, these are all entities fighting different matters or different angles and avenues in the state of this nation today. And it's only because the government has taken its eye off the ball. Government doesn't serve the people or the people's interests, they serve their interests first. And when that happens, citizens need to do something about it, because if you don't, the status quo makes things worse. And we've seen state capture come and go, and I can assure you that the pressure was brought to bear within the ruling party from external forces, brought around a change in the administration and other factors, obviously. But I can tell you that when in 2017, when there was 200,000 people marching all around the country, organized in 1 week, that march by various organizations, when Pravin Gordhan was plucked out of Treasury, there was a visiting Prime Minister, I think from one of the countries in the East, and they saw this. Union buildings and lawns were full, 60,000 people. And the questions were being asked, what is going on in your country? These are films, the full footage of this flies around the country, and pressure starts being brought to bear on government. So that type of active citizenry, peaceful protest, mass peaceful protest, is part of it all. But it's not just about protest. It's about being involved and holding government to account when you can. And so often, NGOs that do this work stop at exposure. And the media does a great job of exposure. We're very fortunate, by the way, to have a free press and the laws we have in that space. But if we didn't, it would be very difficult to get the message across, because the narrative, if it's pushed hard enough and long enough, becomes the reality. And I think ARTA was very fortunate that at the time, social media was big for us. And when we tried to convince the public to stand strong on defying a law, so middle class, motorists are largely middle class South Africans 10 years ago, coming into our new democracy, don't want to break the law. They don't want to go to jail. They don't want to be harassed if their car license isn't renewed and so forth. So it was a hard issue to push, but it became a reality because we were able to form an organization that could stand up for their rights and say, you have a right to break irrational laws. You have a fundamental duty, in fact, but to do so, we will demonstrate that we will go to jail first. So we put ourselves forward. We went and wrote to Sanra and said, if you're going to arrest anybody, arrest us. There were a number of us, and we said, we're not paying. You can see our accounts. We're not paying. So let's test this in court. And they knew they would lose that. So that gives people courage. The minute we did that, and then said to everybody, now, anybody who gets an e-toll fine or summons, we will defend them in court. And that created a massive wave to say to the government, well, now we're not participating. And if enough people break an irrational law, the law has to be changed. If you cannot implement any law that you want to force, especially on new policy, as a government, you suffer a crisis of legitimacy. it's illegitimate if you cannot force your own laws. And so when some people are paying and the majority aren't, it's no longer a user pays principle. It's not because we were against the principle of user pays or against the fact that our roads have to be paid for. We know we have to pay for them. It doesn't fall out of the sky. And we know that we have to, that this technology works, but it works in certain environments. It doesn't work here when your systems are flawed, when you cannot police it. When you have a 60% compliance rate in laws, the people, especially when they're costly laws like veto, the people who back the system, or the people who are trying to comply with the system, learn very quickly how to get around the system if there's no consequences. And that was always going to happen. And now it's dead. They just need to make the decision, but they've been very reluctant. I think the reason why they're being a bit slow, because this sort of came out in the discussion we had with the Minister of Finance, is that if we told them back in 2008, put 10 cents on the fuel levy when it was at R1.47, that would give you the 2 billion rand you need a year to pay for the road upgrade. Because you've got to do what you're trying to do is finance the road upgrade. They decided to put a very expensive e-tolling system in that was going to make them far more than what they needed, because it's an offshore company. It's a good way to get money out of the country. It was a corrupt deal. I don't want to go too deep into all that, but essentially we said, well, we have to stop it. And now they want to try and finance the bonds that they had to borrow to build this road, which, by the way, cost 18 billion rand, 180 kilometers of an upgrade, which our QS and our engineers told us should not have cost more than 6 to 7 billion rand. So there was corruption in the construction. They borrowed too much money. Now they have to pay those bonds back. And that's why we have the debt. That's why we have the problems. They did the same thing with Eskom, the same thing with Transnet, same thing with Praso. If you just look at all the balance sheets, you'll find that as Zuma came into power, revaluing assets and just playing this game of borrowing. And that's where we have this problem of 400 billion rand debt that we're trying to service it. So what does active citizenry mean? We know strangers to it. It really is the practice of citizens' involvement in public policies and decisions that are made, right down to local government. And what we have found at ARTA is that we tend to get on with our lives. We're very busy as individuals, and somebody else will deal with the issue, and it's very nice. And we will acknowledge work that is done by Corruption Watch or ARTA or various organizations that are doing work. But when it comes to participating and doing what should be done, or assisting people who are doing the work, because we don't have time. We are very busy just trying to survive in our lives. And sometimes we understand that, which is why our view has been, well, if you can't get involved, then help people who are doing the work. And that's why we run our donation program. And if we didn't have the donors that we had, we would never have been able to defend the public on the e-toll matter. And we've never been able to nearly declare the delinquent director, stop the R2 matter, stop the car power ships case. We took that to court. We're in court right now to stop Gwede Mantashe from bringing in this gas through 3 ships. Electrification program is going to cost us 220 billion rand over the next 20 years. That's the type of thing. And as John said earlier, 220 cases that we've done service and and not all of them are big projects like that, but some of them are very quick and short and to the point. But where we're going now is we've realized that at local government, where municipalities have literally collapsed around the country due to the gross maladministration and corruption, there's a move afoot to get citizens to become part of the solution, to take over the running of collapsed waterworks, wastewater works, electrification, transformation of electricity and distribution in towns and cities. And that's going to happen. It's happened in Makanda, it's happened in Costa, it's happened in Sunnysore, and it's going to happen more and more. And the only way you do that is to make sure that citizens become organized. So resident associations are the path and the channel that we're flowing through and working through. We've launched, in fact, tonight in Bedford View. We're launching, helping Better Bedford View, a new residents association launch through our CAN network, which stands for Community Action Network, where instead of building our walls higher, fixing our own patch, we need to bring them down and start meeting with the people on the other side of the river, the other side of the railway tracks, because all these different communities are challenging the same municipality in the middle. Some of them have worse problems than others. I mean, you and I might moan about the odd pothole, but when sewage is running through your house in a township, it's hard to live like that when you've got really nothing. So what we want are community action networks. It's a networking of civil society organizations, whether they're community associations, residents associations, business chambers, to start working together to attend the meetings that municipalities have, and they legally have to have the budgeting sessions, the finance sessions, the integrated development plans. And when you start involving yourself and being present at those, not you and I as the individuals, but your committees who are elected to do so, and you contribute to them so they can employ the specialists, the legal teams that might have to come in, the finance people to unpack these budgets, so you become stronger as a collective. And they did that in Makhanda and in Grahamstown. The Unemployed People's Association from the township reached out to the residents associations from the middle class and the wealthy sectors of the town, and they formulated a plan and had the courts order the council to be disbanded because of its inefficiency. We need more of that. It's not going to happen if we don't get involved, if we don't take an interest, if we don't make sure that our resident associations are doing the work on behalf of you. And just picture, when you're in a lovely suburb, there are a lot of suburbs around Joburg, around Bloemfontein, and you just have to look at the cities and how the degradation is just so right. So the movement is about getting people to understand their rights, to use the platform to communicate with their members, to raise funds and to deal and to become part of the solution. When you do that, you teach other communities that part of the solution is not to burn down the schools and the council houses. It's to work together to hold government account, local government account to account. And with that, we've set up now WaterCan, it's a Water Community Action Network, where government has failed in its ability to provide you and I with the information around the quality of your water. You should be able to, in every country, go onto a website, a government website, and find out, look on the map, drill right down to your municipality and find out what the quality of your water is like, what the quality of your rivers are like. You can't do that, Jay. You used to be able to do it, but you can't do it anymore. So we're adopting a process called citizen science, where we're getting citizens to gather the information. They will get testing kits. They will get their local businesses in the areas, shops and that. I mean, every restaurant in town wants clean water. They will be doing the testing at a very cheap rate. And through this community action network, they'll be able to raise funds. So when you spread that load around the entire country and get some national companies to also contribute, you start to find that within the next 2 to 3 years, all the water quality information will be live and updated and accurate on the website, done by citizens for citizens, not by government. So we don't have to rely on government for certain information anymore. And that's the way active citizenry is starting to flow now, where citizens become part of the solution, and we're doing it in such a way that we're getting, the Department of Water and Sanitation heard about the launch of WaterCan, they've engaged with us, and now they want to work with us. They know what's going to happen. No one trusts their information, so government will have to get this information from us. We don't mind. And we do it for free. We've just launched an app now we're just testing in a few municipalities, where you can report potholes, sewage leaks, water leaks, illegal dumping. And instead of having a Joburg one, JRA had one that cost 20 million rand to develop it, by the way, because their mates get involved. And if you go to Grenelli, just across the road, you have to download their app to report. We've got one app, it takes 2 seconds to report a traffic light that's down, a pothole on a road sign. It goes to the right municipality, it geolocates it, and tells them what's wrong. And then if one person reports it, 2 minutes later, the next person reports a pothole, it geolocates to the same pothole or traffic light, and it sends the message to the municipality. And the beauty of it is whether they fix it or not, well, obviously we want them to fix it. It starts to create a dashboard that says these towns fix their potholes on traffic lights and water leaks quicker than those ones. When you start to make information like that transparent, you have a dashboard that starts to send information to the Auditor General, to Treasury, that these are the towns and these are the areas that are looking after their citizens. These are the ones that are failing. These are the ones that are improving. They were bad, but they're getting better. And you use that information wisely to get and expose and get citizens to become part of the solution while you put pressure on government to improve itself. So it's a journey of finding all the avenues that we can to make sure that government is held accountable. Now, on the water can app, for instance, the law is very strong. You may not pump raw sewage into a river. It's a criminal offense, and a city manager can get locked up. But nobody's doing that. So what we do as ANSA is we get the information, and then we don't allow the residents association or the individual in that town who's reporting this to be put under pressure, because they put you under pressure. They come and they bring their graders and they accidentally grade your water pipe outside your house. Or sorry, man, but they really do bully citizens who take a stand. So that's where ANSA comes in. We will take the court case and have the municipal managers arrested. But we can do nothing until we've got the accurate information. And then we follow a due process. Obviously, we engage first, try and get the municipality to behave themselves, fix things. But if not, we'll take a hard stance and put them under pressure. Another app we're looking at developing is the quality of our schools. Around the country, 27,000 schools. And today, right now, most of those schools haven't got books, haven't got their books for this year. They don't have security, they don't have running water. It's so sad. So if you have a dashboard that paints the picture of where it's red, where it's orange, where it's green, why is it red? Why is the red concentrated in this part of KZN? It's got something to do with regional management, area management, or MEC level. And when you expose inefficiency, it's the first part. Transparency and information is the first part of a journey to fix things. But very often government puts their head in the sand, so we don't know how bad it is. So citizen science and through active citizenry, we will show them. So the app will really just be around 5 things, and it'll be, we'll have verified people in the communities of every town around the country that goes in and says, teachers did arrive at school today, the books are on time, the water is flowing, the security is at the level it should be. And then you look at the pass rates of those schools. What were they last year? Did they improve? And the minute you start doing that, you create awareness. Communities get involved. They put pressure on the headmasters, the teachers, the MECs, and so forth. So I think just to wrap it up, that's what we see active citizenry about now. It's about citizen science, bringing people in to become part of the solution as opposed to complaining and moaning and doing nothing about it. That you can do something about it. Just join your residents association and then ask them, what are you doing about the budgeting session that's coming up in your area? Who is your ward council? What are they doing about the issues in your neighborhood? And some people have less issues. But then it's about reaching out to those areas and see how can we help them become part of this? How can we help them get organized? How can we help them manage their financials and their communications? And I've seen this work in many towns where there is this connection between the poor and the rich. And it's a meaningful and an authentic one that they suddenly ignite a massive amount of power, personal power, citizen power. They start to understand their rights and their abilities to put government under pressure. I think that's where we're going at the moment. And it's quite an exciting journey. So we've reinvented ourselves, not stopping what we're doing, holding errant politicians to account, continue to do that. We've got a team, 45 staff, but That team is about 15 to 20. And the new innovative social innovation division is starting to look at pumping these new solutions into the neighborhoods and into various communities around the country. And hopefully we'll see this evolve over the next few years. On the political front, let me just give you a quick view. If somebody had told me 8 months ago, just as we led up to the November elections, would the DA be running Ekurhuleni, Joburg, Tshwane, Mohali City, and 2 others in Gauteng? I would have said no ways. And if they did, it wouldn't be for long. But they are, and they're doing it quite successfully. And they didn't win the majority in any one of those, in any one of these metros in town. They were second. And speaking to Helen Ziller recently, I asked her how did she get that right and how sustainable is, because we saw the coalitions under Herman Mashaba when he was in charge of Joburg. It didn't last long. Tshwane became a mess because a few people crossed the floor and suddenly you have a DA mayor, then you have an ANC mayor, and nobody wants to live in towns and cities where this type of game is played. So this year around, she ensured that they had contracts, that they didn't enter into coalition governments unless there was continuity and proper plans to do so. Now, it's very difficult to do it when you're doing it with a party like the EFF and the DA, whose ideologies are totally different. But when you get them to sign the contracts, and what happens is that it has become, and it will become, a situation of anybody but the ANC. So the minute the ANC drops below 50%, if you can get that right, get the coalitions to work, you start to get sustainable development again. And that's what's happening. A lot of pressure has been put on the DA, but they've only been, I'm not punting for them at all. We have to stay apolitical. What I am saying is that if you look at every municipality where things are working, they are not run by the ANC. That's the reality. The DA has their problems as well. We've had to tackle them on water quality issues in the Western Cape and other areas. So we will tackle any municipality and any municipal manager when they get it wrong, without any fear or favour from a political point of view. All I'm saying is that what we're entering into now is more mature coalition governance, because they see the issues that happen when you have this instability. So that's an interesting development. And now you ask yourself, well, how does that play out in the elections that are going to happen in the next 2 years, the national elections? Because that's where the national decisions are taken. And what you're seeing, what we do know is that in 2024, the ANC will get below 50% of the vote. There's no doubt about that. If you look at the trends, in the local elections, and every election they have dropped off significantly. The local elections have got less than 50% cumulatively across the country. At the last national elections, I think it was about 54%, and it's plummeting. And they've done nothing to arrest that. So what happens? In December, you have the ANC elections for their president. Now, it's a case of better the devil you know than you don't in power like that. You know, it's about choosing the best of a bad bunch. And while Cyril has been extremely slow, and he doesn't have the leadership that we want, the strong, morally courageous leadership that we need to change things. I think he's been playing, first of all, leading up to the last elections at Nasrec, a long game. He's got questions to be answered, but he did what he had to do to get into power, and things were fixed. Things were fixed from this point of view. Sean Abrams has moved out of the NPA, Tom Moyoni out of SARS, and things have started to repair. They're taking their time. There's a lot of decimation of these institutions, but they're getting there. The whole Transnet, forget his name, the old chairperson of Transnet, and others, all of these people are being arrested now, Ace Magashula. So much is starting to happen, but not enough. And I think he needs to get into the second term when you do see, once you get into power in December, a change, a more radical change, an ability to drop certain cabinet members that are currently in power. and positions of authority where they shouldn't be. And that shake-up of cabinet, when you are in a precarious position that you can be removed by your leadership if you move too fast, is one that he doesn't want to open that door. So there is a too slow, but I think it's a methodical and well planned out strategy. Get past the post in December. He's got 18 months left, 18 months to May 2024, to do some radical change for the better, to convince the electorate to stay above 50%. Now, if he does that, you can't do radical change temporarily and then put it back once you get in. Of course, anything can happen. But I think the trajectory would be the right one. And if he doesn't get 50%, it's going to be coalition governments. Now, what does that look like? I don't know if that looks like John Steenhuisen being the president of the country. I can't see that a white president in this country. If the DA had their act together in that space, it would be a lot easier. But who knows what's going to happen? So we're in for some interesting times. I just want to say that there's a lot of positives, a lot of good things happening, but too much negatives that keep holding us back. Too much waste, too much wrong messages, trying to spend 22 million rand on a flagpole. It's just a mindless and brainless sense of message to the people that you just don't care. In a time like this, 22 million rand could be far better spent. So we can force the change. We can push the change. When I say we, the people of this country, across all communities, are fed up. And we can't lose hope. Once you lose hope, you must close the doors and switch off the lights. A lot of us are trapped here. We've got businesses here, we've got family here. We're too old to move. So you want to make the best. And let's, I think, be part of the solution. Let's join our organizations that have credibility, that are transparent, support them, and I can assure you good things will start to flow. Thanks for your time.
Question? Yes, we're talking about energy, and the world is going over to electric cars in a big way, and we don't have Eskom producing enough energy anyway. So if they've got to take over electricity, that the energy kilowatts, whatever, that is coming from fuel, I think we've got a big problem coming up.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, that's why Cyril Ramaphosa moved the limit from 1 megawatt generation to 100. And you heard Andre de Ruyter recently say, scrap even 100. Don't even limit it to 1,000 megawatts. Allow the privatization of energy generation to go wherever it wants to go. And that's happening quite quickly. I think we have an opportunity in this country to lead the world with our sunlight and ability to create green hydrogen through solar energy. Green hydrogen will be the power source of trucks and buses in the future, and eventually cars. So, you know, the move to electric vehicles, if you just put, it makes it a lot more expensive, but if you put a solar panel on your arcade, your park roof boat at work, and here charges batteries, and those batteries charge at night, you can run and charge your electric vehicles off the sun, if the sun's shining enough, and we have good sunlight in many parts of the country. So that's going to play out in a very interesting space. Government is too slow about the electric vehicle policy in this country. Unfortunately, Kenya is already ahead of us. We should have been well down the road. There should be no import duties on electric cars. But the power grid is constrained, so it would be problematic if a million cars were parked in the garage at 6 o'clock in the evening charging off electricity. So we're not really good, but that solution is going to have to play out.
Thank you.
What about hybrid cars?
The hybrid is battery and petrol, yeah.
That would say petrol.
Yeah, it does. Certainly, most manufacturers have a hybrid car, but now they're switching to either pure electric or still petrol, and then a few models in hybrid. But that does reduce the cost of petrol.
But if we pushed it in this country and they had a market here,
because this is too expensive. These cars are very expensive. As I said, the import duties, if they took them off those cars, in many countries around the world, electric cars and small electric cars had half the price of licensing, from a tax point of view. In Paris, if you drive a smart car, electric car, you park for free. All those benefits, we don't get them here. We don't have that visionary long-term mindsets to attract people into electric vehicles, but probably a godsend because the electricity shortage. So there was another question.
No. When I've noticed that not pushing, not changing model of going to putting all taxes into a trust and then controlling it that way. Are you finding the way you're going, the racial thing is better and you're getting more traction with the communities, or what stopped you going up?
Well, you mean a tax revolt?
Yeah.
So tax revolts, if they're focused like the e-toll tax revolts for specific purposes, are quite impactful. A tax revolt in a small town to not pay the local community so that you can take over, especially if it's legally bound, because if it's not legally done, you just have a problem. But let's talk about, because we get asked this question often, why don't we drive tax revolts in the country and get the funds put into a trust account and try and run the country as citizens? The first step you need is business to be on board. Business pays over 90% of the taxes. VAT, every month, is paid over by business, PAYE, company tax, excise duties and that. It's a few people that are on provisional taxes that might be able to withhold their tax. So if you speak to business, they won't go down that road. They refuse to. The law is very strongly in favor of government. When that happens, the law is that government will instruct the banks to take the money out of those accounts of those businesses anyway and pay it over on a ratio of what they used to pay. So if you try to start it now, A, business won't come on board, B, it's not going to be practical from that point of view. But let's say you could get that right. The next problem you have is, I don't know if you and I want to live in a country where the police don't get their salary, where the ports authorities don't get their salaries, where teachers don't get their salaries, nurses. Because what you have is overnight chaos, and you have a collapse of the system, and trying to build it up. Then on top of that now, let's say civil society runs this big bank account, everybody pays into it. How do we start to pay the people that you want to keep the lights on in the various areas? So tax revolt is both not possible, not practical, and probably the worst nightmare you could have. You did live in anarchy, and I don't think we want that. So the route we believe we should go is to engage with government, engage hard, put them under pressure, hold them to account, take them to court like we are doing, and just get in the way, become a barrier to the national process. It's like Arthur, we just, we're going to go to court and you win that. You stop, we're going to not let you get the car power shifts and you haven't followed due process. We're not going to allow it. Go to court, the court stop, they can't do anything. And even if they get past some of those hurdles, then we'll go and protest. But you protest seriously, you bring a lot of pressure. The whole nuclear deal was stopped in court 3 years ago by civil activists. Had they not, the Russians would be here trying to build a trillion rand, monolith that was going to just bring this country down. That's the active citizenry we need. And while you're doing that, reach out, try and engage. There are good people in government, are very good people, not enough, who are talking, who are engaging with us, saying, okay, how do we do this? What do we do here? And those that aren't listening, we force them to listen, and we'll get in their way and make their lives difficult. So I think that's working. Yeah, but that what you're talking about is the right way to go in local government. You can stop at a time, take the money away from the council, put that into a trust account, fix the roads, the water, and there is going to be a lot more of that. On a national level, difficult, local level, absolutely. I think you're going to see a lot of tax revolts in towns in the next 3 or 4 years. And we're going to be part of a lot of that.
Right. Just from a town perspective, I know that us going to dinner and we don't put pressure on the kitchen. If there's maybe one short last question.
That's it. That was very good. Thanks again. You've been amazing.
Okay.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, calm, sensible, articulate, intelligent. We can go on and on with adjectives to describe this wonderful man and his organization. I think if you like me and you read the Sunday Times, my face screws up and you think, oh my gosh, what can we do? We're older, we're not as vibrant as we used to be, we can't get out in the streets and do things. But as Wayne said, we can support those who can and are prepared to do that. And I really think that Wayne, you and your organizations have done an amazing job. You've spoken to us before and we were all inspired when you were here last time. I think we'd all agree that we've been inspired again tonight with a lot more positive thoughts and an approach. And it's good to know. I have hoped that there were still good people in the government, and I do believe that. But to hear it from you and to hear what you are doing together with your groups, it's the way to go. And I think if any of us are able to assist, it's vital that we do. Not only for us, we've got children and grandchildren in the country, and we need to get it right before we pop the mortal coil. So if you are able to help, I'm doing the sales punch on behalf of Wayne. Let's do what we can. But in the meanwhile, thank you, Wayne, for a most enjoyable and uplifting talk, and a small token of appreciation from us all. Thank you so much.
So much. I just want to say, I have to get asked, how do we help? What do we do? There's a saying by Edmund that says the person who makes the biggest mistake is the one that does nothing because they felt they could only give a little. But it's the little that makes a difference, because we are crowdfunded. And the average donation we get is 100 Rand. Some people give us 50 Rand a month, some people give us 200 Rand. Doesn't matter. The fact that you're giving makes you an active citizen. And if you just go into our website at outer.co.za, there's a join now button. It takes 10 minutes. It's a little debit order because we don't have to chase funding every month. You can change it, you can stop it at any time. But that 100 Rand is, forego one hamburger a month. Sure, you can do that. Put it into good active citizen fight, and we'll do the fight for you. You can claim to be an active citizen. So join up if you're not already a member. Thanks again for coming to us.